What part of Detroit are you in?
Between Detroit and Ann Arbor, a suburb.
Yeah, I got you. I got you. I have Mackinac City, and then we were the interstate. Kind of when you come down through there, it takes you
Yeah.
around.
Yeah,
So
you go right through Detroit. Yeah.
yeah. So that's probably the I did that a couple times. I have a friend that had a cottage up in Canada. So
Okay.
I would go up. You're talking early 2000s, probably the last time I've been up there, man. So,
It's been
but
a minute.
yeah, beautiful country though, man.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
the one thing that caught my eye. You guys leave all your roads. Their secondary roads are gravel. A lot
Oh,
of the yeah, a lot of the roads that were parallel on the interstate were gravel. When I talked to someone, they're like, "Yeah, they don't. We scrape so much snow, and then they get repurposed as snowmobile trails."
ah. That must be just we call it up north.
Yeah,
Anything north of, here, we call
yeah.
that up north. So,
Is that the UP? Is that, I guess that's what they were called,
well,
upper
it's the
peninsula.
upper lower. It
Yeah,
starts getting pretty sporadically populated. You get above Flint pretty much, and
yeah.
it gets a lot more spacious and country-ish and farmland, and then of course that continues up into the UP, which mostly just trees.
Um, let me tell everybody who I got with me today. I'm excited. I wrote this out a little bit there, man, for you. Sometimes life knocks you down so hard that it feels like there's no way forward. But what if the moment was actually the start of something greater? Today's guest knows exactly what it's like to hit rock bottom and how to rebuild from there. Bob Wischer, also known as a relationship engineer, is the founder of Men Becoming Better Men, and a coach dedicated to helping men break free from isolation, shame, and fear to find purpose and connection. After experiencing divorce and career loss, Bob transformed his own life and now empowers others to do the same through coaching, masterminds, and leadership training. I'm excited, man. That little intro there, I've been knocked down so hard that I just didn't feel like I was getting back. And then when I speak now, Bob, I'll steal a minute from you for a second. But when I speak now, I told someone I was like I was so mad and angry for about 3 years that I didn't realize all the good things that was going on in my life. And then I
Yeah,
had this moment of now when I speak, I'm like, this is all I found all the positives. I'm like I was so wrapped up in the negative, man. So when I was reading that, learning more about you, I wanted to echo that because it spoke to me. So I appreciate you being here with us today.
yeah, no problem.
Tell
Thanks for
me,
having me.
tell me what a day in your life looks like.
Well, oh, that's kind of a challenging question right now because I still do work a full-time day job, corporate.
Yeah.
Um, and so I
Hey, that's
spoke.
not Bob, but listen, that's 50% of the people that I work with, right?
Oh, yeah,
They're coaching, they're running a full time, and they're passionate about what they do, man. So
yeah.
don't sell yourself short on that, dude. That's a big lift on your own. So
Oh, yeah,
you're balancing a W-2 job and then running your own business on the side, man.
yeah, yeah.
Um, Big deal. So what do you do for your full time work?
Automotive industry, of
Oh,
course, in the
yeah.
Detroit area. It's
Yeah.
kind of you grow up in it, you live in it, and you can't. It's hard to get away from.
Yeah.
So
And then you take down. When do you find time to do your coaching and the work that you like to do for just relationship and men's work and stuff? What does that look
yeah,
like?
mostly evenings after hours. Sometimes on the weekend, depends on what's going on. But most of the local things I do, like my men's groups that I run, and I have a group that I run at church as well. That's all weekend stuff. So
So just about fitting time in and stuff.
yeah,
Um, you're probably like me and a lot of others that we come in contact with. You didn't wake up one day and say, I'm going to start this. I think it's a great idea. There's probably something that may have happened. Walk us.
actually two things, and
Yeah.
one of them is kind of interesting. I'm guessing you're familiar with the book No More Mr. Nice Guy, right? Dr.
Yeah.
Robert Glover.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm supposed to interview him for my podcast. I was supposed to do it here in 2 hours today, but he postponed me till next week. So that was one key cog was reading that book.
Yeah.
realizing that I was a nice guy. I had a lot of nice guy tendencies, and not that being a nice guy is a bad thing. It's just there's a lot of things that men, as we're coming up through life, we don't realize that we're kind of falling into some of these patterns of being nice. I mean the big thing about that is by meaning that we're go with the flow. We don't express our needs. We don't ask for things we want. We don't set boundaries, things like that. That we're constantly just catering to other people, and whether it's spouses or family or whatever, jobs, and that was a huge key. The second book I read was called The Truth About Men, and what that hit me really hard with that one. In addition to after reading Dr. Glover's book, he talked about the importance of men being in community together.
Yeah.
And it's something that at that point I was in my mid 50s, and it's something I'd never really understood or heard of. I mean, of course we had sports teams and stuff, right? Growing up, we played ball and all that stuff, but it was always the competitive. We were competing for spots on the team. We were competing against other teams. We were always competing against other men. And it kind of develops within us, at least it did in me, this feeling of competition all the time, everything, whether it was at work or women or whatever. And that's not how it's meant to be. We're meant to be in community with each other. I mean, women do it perfectly. And actually, somebody mentioned to me yesterday, I was in a conversation, how amazing it is that women have figured this out, and they're working in community and they're leveling up, and men we seem to be stuck. It's because we've lost track of that ability to connect with each other on a I got your back, iron sharpens iron kind of basis. And of course there's little pockets of it that are now popping up. And now that I'm, in that space and in that area, I see it everywhere. But if you go out and I've talked to dozens of men through my men's group, and they come in and they're like, I didn't know anything like this ever existed. And it's like, well, yeah, it doesn't. I mean, it's my group was one of the few in this area where we actually met physically in person and connected on that level. Like, what's going on with you? Not going and playing golf, or not, going to a sporting event or something like that, or a concert. It's sitting down, looking each other in the eye, and what's going on with you? What do you do? What kind of things are you dealing with? How can I support you? And then doing that back and forth for each other. It has been some of the most valuable work that we've done over the last 5 years, and bringing men together and I joke about it all the time. It's one of the phrases I've heard the most often in the last 5 years is, I thought I was the only one going through this.
Yeah.
And it's not the case. It's like we're all going through this same, mind-bending situation of life and living and marriage and kids and jobs and whatever else, and thinking we're all on our own. And it's not the case. And once we get connected with each other, it makes life a heck of a lot easier.
What kind of life was you living before you found your first book?
Actually, I had been recently divorced. I had
Yep.
been married for 19 years. And again, a lot of the nice guy tendencies that I was exhibiting in that marriage that made me not a leader in my own home, not the man that I should have been being. And then it just eroded away. And of course, I started feeling like I wasn't being fulfilled on my side of it. I was obviously a cause of a lot of that because of the way I was being, but I'm the one that walked away, and it didn't go well. It went real bad during the time of the divorce. Actually, she was trying to separate me from my kids and drive a wedge between us. That I had done a great job with the kids developing over first 15 to 18 years of their lives, because it's about their age ranges they were in when we got divorced. And she drove a wedge between me and my kids, and it was terrifying. And that was probably one of the lowest points of my life, was coming out of that divorce and having to, at ages 16 to 18 rebuild my relationships with my kids. Um, and I was terrified. And I didn't have. I remember my brother lives in Texas. He's, we're close, but we're not. It's not like we pick up the phone and talk feelings to each other. And a lot of the other guys in my life at that time were like family friends from my ex and I. So I lost most of them in the divorce. So I had nobody. And I'm looking around going, okay, my kids are, doing their thing. They're going off to college and doing their thing. The woman I was with for 20 years, we're no longer together. And I'm basically standing here by myself wondering what the heck is next for me in my life.
Yeah.
I've been in the automotive industry and corporate for a long time too. So I always had that. But as far as people around me that had the ability to lift me up and fill me up and help me see where I needed to go and what I wanted to do and who I wanted to be, they weren't existent. And without some of the guys that have come into my life in the last 5 years or so, I'd still be wandering around in the dark. I like to picture like the ostrich's head in the sand, right? That's kind of how I felt for probably the first 40 some years of my life. Was I was just wandering around, wondering why things weren't going the way I envisioned them, and it was because of the way I was being and the way I was, just didn't have a clue that we were made to be in community with each other.
There's Detroit's a big city, man.
Yeah.
And it's crazy that that you become the solution, right? Yeah, ultimately, you have to set up this environment for yourself to be able to thrive in. For just transfer, just so I enjoy for everybody to kind of know time wise. What year are you talking about there when you kind of exited your marriage?
2014, somewhere around 2014, yeah, about
Yeah,
10 years ago.
yeah. So like I always kind of point that out because you have access to technology. It's like
Yeah.
it's our times, right?
Yeah, it wasn't the dark ages.
Yeah. Because some folks, I had my guest on yesterday. He was orphaned at 15,
Mm,
and orphaned at 15 in 1979, or no,
yeah.
something like that, right? And I'm like, hang on here. That's a big deal.
Yeah.
It's no, right? It's a bigger deal because
Different
your
time and
access
space.
to, yeah, your access to grabbing traction and just services
Hmm.
and all the things. So, but man, you that takes you on this path. So first book comes in around this time. Is that when you found that, or did you find community first and then the book, or
No,
what
no,
was that like?
I actually, I waffled for a couple of years. Um, and it wasn't probably till, 2018 or 2019, 2018 when we started, 2018 or 2019. I don't know, the years run together. Um, when I was started really voraciously reading and getting into those books and realizing that, there's the thing is I had shunned personal growth for the previous 20 years. I was like, I graduated from college, I have a degree, I know everything I need to know. Wrong. That was the biggest mistake I ever made, was stopping my personal growth, educational, whether educational reading, whatever, in that time between when I graduated from college and I was about 45 years old. Because I feel like now everything I read, I'm like, God, I wish I'd have known this 20 years ago.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah, no, I think information sometimes finds you at the right time too.
Yeah, that's true.
There's a point in time when I heard a lot, I just wasn't ready to hear it.
My,
And then I go
yeah.
back to revisit that. So timing wise, it's you may have had some things that was lingering in there, maybe nudging you in a different direction
Hmm.
or whatever. You just wasn't like you had comfort. You weren't tuned in to
Yeah.
like you are now, right? I'm the same way. I'm very self aware of when things come into my life or when someone's giving me some advice. I don't just say like yeah, whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
Let it
Yeah.
rush through my head. Man, all right. So this kicks you off into this journey of where you become the relationship engineer. Kind of explain that to me and what that looks like, and how does that help coach men that are stuck?
Yeah. So relationship engineer came to be just because it was a great play on what I've been doing for 30 years is engineering
Yeah.
in the automotive industry, and putting that together with the coaching experience and skills that I developed through various certifications and stuff like that. It just felt like a great fit to put together. So what I love to do is to sit down with men and figure out what it is that they've been struggling with, where they're stuck. A lot of times it's purpose. A lot of times it could be marriage. A lot of times it could be um, just not being connected with other men, kind of like I described, because a lot of those were my story. A lot of I struggled with my marriage. I struggled with connections and friends, and at points in time in that period, just after my divorce too, I was struggling kind of in my career. So a lot of those things just stick with me, and then whenever I end up talking to a man that has a struggle in those areas, because another big part of my story too is that around that, just before that time I got divorced, two of my coworkers had taken their own lives.
Mm.
So and that's another kind of another layer of this whole thing too, is as I was going through that divorce process, that alienation from my kids, I started thinking about, okay, well, if all of this is going away, do I really need to be here? Right. And starting to have those kind of thoughts start
Yeah.
creeping in. So that became another big part of why Men Becoming Better Men came to be, and creating the group, creating programs around how to help men, and using what we call our standards to, um, basically give guys a foundation of some of the things that maybe we learned when we were younger, but we don't really realize that they are really important, like keeping your word.
Yeah.
Um, I work with a lot of engineers, right? And a lot of people in business place. And one of my key things that I never knew was, if you use the phrase, I think, I feel, maybe, kind of those types of words at the beginning of a sentence, that you're making it up. You're not speaking with facts. So in the automotive industry, or in any business really, if I said to you, I think, the sky is blue, I get this trigger now. You think the sky is blue. That means you don't know that the sky is blue. So that means you're talking out of your, what, and I need to check you on some of your facts, because if I'm going to take whatever you just told me and go forward with it and use it to make a decision, or to do something else upstream in the business that we're doing, I could get burnt, because you're making something up that you don't have facts behind. So and it became one of our standards, and that's one of the things that people don't really realize, how often people say I think, or I feel, or a word like that disqualifies basically what you're about to say, that you really don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, no, you spot on with that. Let me ask you this. You got my curiosities just on your background. How'd you and your first wife meet?
We met at college, actually.
College, yeah. So I had a hankling. It was one of those. It was easier. And then, was your dad around, male mentor, or what was that?
He was around, but he wasn't around. He
Yeah,
was physically around, but he wasn't
yeah.
around. He worked. He had about an hour commute. So I didn't see him in the morning. Didn't when he got by the time I get home from school, homework, chilling, whatever.
Yeah.
He'd roll in the door. We'd eat dinner, and he'd fall asleep in the lazy boy. Um, that was
Did
a
you
lot
ever
of my,
did you ever get to see how he treated your mom or influenced your mom?
that was another layer of it, is they didn't have that tight of a relationship.
Yeah.
I come to find out, of course, decades later, they were kind of roommating it
Yep.
during my high school years, and
Yeah.
and actually just not not too long after my brother and I got out of school and started families of our own, they split up. They're both remarried now. They're both happy as can be. But yeah, a lot of the demonstration of how relationships were supposed to work, I missed the boat. And that's another part of why I want to work with guys now that if they're struggling in that area, and then we can point those things out together and work on them and figure out who's really at fault, because 9 times out of 10 it's this guy, um, because of a way we're being or something we're doing that is is not leading our family, or having, like I said earlier, boundaries around certain things, or whatever. So
It glitched there for something and it kicked me out. I came right
yeah,
back in.
I noticed that. I kept talking.
Yeah, yeah, you're good because I was watching my producer thing. I was watching you keep going. I have it's never done that before. I have.
Yeah.
Sorry, folks, if you lost on Jeff, I wasn't saying anything at all. Now, and here's why I ask you that, right? Because listen, I'm right there with you. I didn't get married till way later in life. 2 kids, and tell my kids all the time. I'm like, listen, I don't know how many dads y'all ever had, and both of them are always like, well, just one. And I go, okay, well, y'all the only kids I've ever had,
Mhm.
and y'all they live in a digital age. I came up in kind of getting into that, but like. They have to deal with texting and cell phone and access to information. Like you guys have, if when I wanted to take I was telling them one day, I'm like, 'cause there's some stuff came out on just taking pictures, right? And getting encouraged by a stranger on the internet to take pictures. So I was teaching this lesson. I'm like, if I wanted to do that back in my day, I had to take a 110 with a flash cube, snap myself, send it roll off. After it got done, 2 weeks later, I got a blurry picture back with my finger over it and had to redo it all over again. You guys,
Yep.
it's like this, right? And so there's not a manual. And same thing even with my wife now. That's what I was heard. It's like you're what you're able, and folks like you and I, who's been through, put ourselves through unnecessary hell, but we come out on this thing to where we want to teach and preach and help. You've able to create like this little playbook to where maybe there is a manual and there is some mentoring,
Hmm.
same type stuff, man. So that's why I always ask it. It's like because you're only influenced by who you're influenced, and your dad at that time was probably your biggest influence. And you meet your wife in college, where there's a lot of, where it's an easy place. And sometimes folks are looking for connection there. So it becomes easier
Hmm.
through friends and all these things. But once you get married, you got to work. And it's the
Yeah.
kids and then the complacency. So that's where I kind of wanted to step us into was
Yeah.
explaining to the rest of the world if you're struggling, like Bob's talked about, don't be afraid of that because there's no manual, right? You're just around
Yeah.
people who don't know, or you're not around the right people. So don't like sit back and think, oh, I can't figure this out. No, no, no. This is why we have these conversations now, is because we're doing better about helping navigate this. So did was it 19 years is a long time? Was it one of those? Was it slow decline over time, or is it always like 19 years that we had to
No, it
really?
was yeah, it was a slow decline over time. We definitely, it started out good. The kids came along. We were busy. We had things to do, and then got to a point where we just started separate. Moving away from each other mentally, physically, spiritually, and yeah, it probably went too long.
Yeah,
And we probably should have got help. And that's the thing. I have a great point from what you just said. If you're struggling in any way, shape, or form, ask someone for help.
yeah,
Don't be afraid to, and that's one thing I talked to my coach about this morning was my my feel to need to be perfect with things. And it's not the case. You don't have to be perfect with everything. You're allowed to make mistakes.
yeah,
And feeling like that you need to ask for help is not a mistake. It's actually a strength. It's smart, and it makes a lot of sense, because when guys have been there and have done that, it's a heck of a lot easier to help you avoid those pitfalls. And I was honestly, and that probably you do too, Jeff, is you want the next generation, you want your kids and their kids to be, and even younger, the millennials that are younger than that, we want you all to thrive and take care of us when we're old. So don't be afraid to ask for help, because like you said too, Jeff, we've been through the non-information age, if you want to call it that. We don't have Google or Chat GPT at our fingertips to answer any dang question we need. And there's certain things that you can't get out of Chat GPT either, that are going to point you in the right direction about how to be as a man and as a leader of your family, and take care of your family.
That's engineers and law enforcement. They're two worlds. I've never been an engineer, but I've been in law enforcement, and we operate in perfection. Got to get it right. You got
It's life or
to get it
death.
right. Yeah,
It's life or death in that. Automotive is not so much life or death.
Yeah.
But
But still, though, man, you have the same level of get it right as it ain't bullets. We always said the analogy of, hey, you can't put the bullets back in the gun. So when you go to pull that trigger, you got to be really. It's different, but for you, it's still it's trust, and you want your work to excel, and it's going to be your engineering work may become part of life or death at any given time. And then your
car parts,
yeah.
That's I try to justify it to myself every once in a while that we're making important car parts that are safety related. So if someone is if our part works right on the car, you're not going to get an accident. So
yeah. You touched on something about asking for help, and that's what I was we're kind of walking down that path. I was thinking, and sometimes we use the saying at the gym, the heaviest weight in the gym is the front door, right? But the same thing is, if sometimes the first step of that help is to reach out, is to pick up the phone or what have you. So what is that? What is those first steps that you would encourage someone who's listening to us right now, that's like, hey, over here, y'all talking to me. What are those first steps that we can encourage someone to take? And maybe, Bob, when you think about it too, where we talked about your slow decline, they may be just here. They may be just starting down that decline, and it's very recoverable. It's not exitable. It's not time for all that. But what is your kind of couple of things that you can leave with someone that is there, that is afraid to ask for help?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the first thing I do, if I had to do it all over again, I'd have found a men's group. I'd have found a men's support, whether it's an online community, there's dozens of them, or even better. Personally, I prefer the in-person version. Online to me gets very unimpersonal.
Same.
That's not a word, but I made it up.
Hey, you're on my podcast, Bob. I make up words all the time.
But to be able to have at least a handful, if not a room full of guys that you can relate to and talk with and pick their brains and different experiences and different ages. Our in-person men's group, we had guys in their 20s and guys in their 80s, all intermingling together and learning stuff from me. I mean, the old guys would learn from the young guys just as much as vice versa. So get yourself into a community like that, whether it's online or in person. If every man in the U.S. was to get to be a part of a men's group like that, I think the majority of our problems in this country would quickly erode away, because that's what drives. I've even seen my kid posted yesterday on social media something political, and again, and I'm not a big political person, but the fact that she did it was like but just those kinds of things where that angst comes between groups of people. So much of that could be resolved.
Yeah,
I think just by being able to be in community with men and women with women, like it used to be back before this, when this country was first founded, where men, dad worked the farm, grandpa worked the farm, the kids worked the farm. and we were together all the time, and you were learning from each other all the time. And then industrial age came, and dad went off to work, and he's working in a factory or in an office or something, and the kids are at home, going to school with mostly female teachers and learning how to basically be
Yeah.
feminine. We were great at learning our feminine skills, because we do need feminine skills in addition to our masculine skills. But we lost any teaching or any replication of the masculine skills of penetrating. Men are meant to penetrate the world, literally and sexually. So same difference. That's the so we're meant to go and do. And when men don't do, when we get complacent, we just sit back and wait for things to come to us. That's when things get tricky.
You compound that with single mom, no dad in the
Yeah.
picture, right?
Yeah.
I was always fortunate enough that throughout the years, I had male role models, and I go back to them. I have my mom's. They've never been married, but they've been together. I've turned 50. They've been together 50 years, and I tell him on Father's Day, I'm like, you could have left any time you wanted to, but you chose to stay with me. So I've been around a very positive male role model, and even though I didn't know my dad, but had that. And then if you'll see some stuff I put up from time to time is the cops were at my house a lot, right? Because my grandfather was a little bit of a hellraiser, a whole lot of a hellraiser. Let's call it what it was. And so the cops was at my house. So when the cops are at your house, you're either going to be a criminal or you're going to be a cop, right? So those guys just through watching them and some other influences I had, that's the path that I ended up on. It wasn't like, I'm going to do, but it was just because of the influence. And then my mom was very like, I wasn't no option to go be the bad kid, right? So that's most my path was into public safety and some of those things. So I was fortunate, but I see that disconnect now, especially now, to where it's where there's an absence of just male representation, and I
Yeah.
see that. I see that shortcoming that we have a lot of times.
Yeah, because we're too complacent. We sit back and we wait for things to happen, and that's not the primary male characteristic, which is to go forward, do, and penetrate, and be part of action.
Yeah. You're inside of your mastermind that you run. What are a couple of the key principles that you teach?
It's really built around the standards that I mentioned earlier, like don't make things up, which is don't use those particular words. Being on time for things. A lot of people don't have any respect for time. The other one would be like excellence, not perfection. You don't need to be perfection. You don't need to be perfect at everything. You just need to give your absolute best all the time. Learn from your mistakes. There's a whole bunch of them now. My head's spinning, but
Yeah, you're good. Yeah,
it's
good. That's a couple, right? It's just
but they're those are little things. They're little things that, like I said earlier, we should have learned growing up, and we may have, but like you said, I think you said this earlier, we may not have heard it at the right time to have it go, oh, okay, that's what that means.
Yeah. You mentioned, and you may have told me, and we may have got around it, but that rock bottom moment. Where was you at when you felt like you had hit that rock bottom moment?
It was just after the divorce, and just during I mentioned that particular job that I was in. I hit it, and I hit rock bottom, and it was kind of like, if I drove into the opposing traffic, nobody's going to miss me.
I got you.
And not too long after that, I saw an ad on Facebook for high performance men's coaching, and I probably, again, that's the same statement, at the right time.
Yep.
It appeared right, and it was like it hit me, and I engaged in it, and it was the best investment I ever made. Worked with my first coach for 6 months, and made a world of difference. Got out of that headspace that I was in to think that my career had been worthless, my marriage had been worthless, um, just all of those, depression. I was being medicated at the time for depression. So yeah, it was a perfect storm of stuff that all happened at once, and it was just that one thing, that one action I took to make that investment. And heck yeah, it's a lot of money, but it was necessary, and it opened numerous doors, and those doors are still opening for me. I mean, I just back last May. Have you ever heard of F3? It's a workout group for men.
Yeah.
They probably have them down in Virginia.
Yeah.
Just look into it. But it's a group of men. We get together in the morning, work out like at 6:30 in the morning, and it's just a fun way to a get healthy, b meet other like-minded men that want to be healthy, and there's the faith component to it. We end in what's called the circle of trust, and it's just even little things like that. These opportunities that just keep coming into my path that are opportunities to bring men together in various ways. With whether we're coaching or not doesn't really matter. But it's just that we're making those connections and having people that we can lean on when we need them.
The money you spent on your coaching gave you your life back.
Oh, absolutely.
Right. I mean, that's we're putting prices on stuff, folks. There's some things that's priceless, and
Absolutely.
I run into that as well with people that's in coaching and all the things, but it's there to help you shorten the gap. Bob, I ask you that because it's easy for us to say that the coaching and things like that, and you've highly recommended getting asking for help. We've talked about a couple of different things, and that rock bottom moment. I've been there, and it's always different for different folks. But what as we wrap up here, what's that one piece of advice you told them to get help, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's sometimes that's like talking to an alcoholic with a beer in his hand, right? Um, See, we've told them, hey, you need to go get some help if you're
Yeah.
struggling. But what's that? What are we going to leave them with advice wise, man? One piece of advice that we can leave them with that's going to nudge them down that path to get into that next phase, right?
So I think it would be find your why.
Yeah, that's good.
Find your why, because that was the other part of it that I didn't mention was as a part of that when I was working with that coach. One of the first things we did was it was this exercise about purpose, how to find your purpose, and again at that point in time, I'd been doing the same job for 20 some odd years. Kind of on the outskirts of my family. I was like, what am I? I'm 45 years old. My life is not even halfway over. What am I supposed to do? And it wasn't until I created a purpose statement, so I can remember what it used to be: express and inspire love and wellness within myself and to others. And having that changed. That was the keys to changing everything else around my life. It gave me a North Star or a direction that I can head in at everything in my life, and all the things that, whether it's F3 or my journey group or my men's groups or my one-on-one coaching, all that stuff is all going in that direction, which is obviously what God wanted me to do in the first place.
Yeah. That's powerful, man. Folks, it's like I said, it's easy for us to tell somebody you need to get help, but when you're struggling, if you can start sitting down and figuring out why, you'll start finding your purposes. You'll start finding all those things, and I'll send you a picture, Bob, or I'll tag you. I'll post it and tag you in it. But it's about it comes down to that. It's just about being in the moment and just learning your why, things along those lines. I created an image about it a couple of years ago.
Nice.
So that's a good one. So folks, if you listen to that, man, is that is you're struggling, you're on the fence, whatever that might look like. Marriage is failing. There's people standing by to help. We know that, but you gotta get your mind right. get your mind working along those lines. So that little bit of advice there on just on discovering your why and finding your why is just amazing advice to wrap us up. Bob, how do you want folks to get in touch with you? How can if they want to like you?
Yeah.
Listen, it's easy for us to say too that Bob said about to help you. So don't think that you don't have the opportunity with a couple guys that enjoy helping people. But how can
Yeah,
we
for
get in touch
sure.
with you?
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram at the relationship engineer. You can also find me on the website. My website is www.menbecomingbettermen.com.
Um, Bob, if you look over my shoulder there, you'll see that breaking the curse image, and I speak to that because it details my life. And one of my goals in my coaching and things I do when I speak is to talk about breaking that curse and whatever you
Mhm.
feel like is burned you with. And yesterday during my episode, it kind of struck me as some of my guests. There's a couple different titles I give, but you're one of the ones that now I call a curse breaker. And
Oh,
you through your expertise and the things that you're doing and just your story and your travels is you can help come alongside men to help them repair their families, find new life, all those things. And that, my friend, is definitely breaking curses if you ain't
I'm,
ever.
I'm,
All
I'm,
right.
I'm honored to be a curse breaker. I
Yeah.
like it. I like it.
Yeah. So I appreciate you being with us today and let me
Thanks for
learn more
having me.
about you. I can't wait. Maybe at some point in time, we can get back together. Maybe have one of your success stories on with us. We can just pick their brain about where they were at as well, and have something that we can share as a case study that'll help further your efforts. Because there's not enough men that's going to reach out for you, in my opinion. If you get 100 calls, that's not enough because there's a lot of people out there struggling and need what you're doing.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Appreciate you, brother.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. Thank you.